Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to use the power of food to get more energy, the body we love, and that zest for life that we crave. Today, we have Jo Whitton, who is the author of two amazing cookbooks. One is called Quirky Cooking, and the other is Life Changing Food. She's also the founder of Quirky Cooking, a vibrant online community where she shares her tips and recipes for delicious healing food and happy, healthy living. Welcome back, Jo. You were on our first series and now we've got you again. I'm so pleased.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Well, it's our pleasure. So let's for those that weren't in the first series, can we start again with your story? And we'll go from there.
Sure. So I grew up in a home where we ate mostly whole foods. My mum cooked from scratch, even breads, cakes, biscuits, everything. We didn't really have like boxes of cereal or, junk food in the house, more because it was too expensive. And mum was really very good at being thrifty and budget minded, and she would grow so much in the backyard, go to the markets at the end of the Saturday and get the stuff that was getting thrown out and make all sorts of things with it. She never wasted anything. And we grew up just eating really simple, delicious food. We didn't have a TV or anything, or computers or anything growing up, and we spent a lot of time being creative, cooking, artwork, reading, all of that kind of stuff, getting outside into nature. And so I had a beautiful childhood, learnt heaps about cooking, and was encouraged to be in the kitchen cooking from a very young age. Yeah. But somehow I was the sick one of the family. So I always had colds, always had a runny nose, like really bad from the time early as I can remember. Used to get the headaches and the constant hay fever. I'd wake up in the morning just sneezing and sneezing and sneezing. And, I'd be at school and I was constantly going into the sick bay to lay down when I was a little kid. And my teacher would be like, "Why are you always going to the sick bay?" I'm like, "My stomach always hurts." And mum didn't know why. She just thought, well, it's just her genetic makeup. It's just who she is. There's nothing we can do. Give her some Sudafed, give her some antihistamines. Right from the time I was little, I was having medication for all that kind of stuff, and just the over-the-counter stuff, but still not great for your gut. The only thing looking back that I can try and figure out why I was unwell, mum did use a lot of white flour and white sugar and refined sort of ingredients to make food, and we did eat a lot of sugar. So we were raised, my parents are Texan, and so we were raised on iced tea with lots of sugar in it, and that was just something we drank every hour. You didn't drink water, you drank iced tea. So I had a lot of sugar. A lot of sweets. Mum did a lot of baking. Every day there was baking, cakes, biscuits, fried pies, whatever, donuts, homemade donuts. Was delicious, but probably not the best. Yeah. And then there's all the usual, I think mum was just super busy. Before I was born, she was quite thin, so maybe she wasn't that well when I was in the womb. Who knows? There's so many variables, toxic environment, who knows? So although she did the very best she could, she stopped breastfeeding early too, because I was always hungry, and she got me straight on to, actually I drank a lot of Milo from 9 months old with cow's milk. And she said, I was like, "Mom, Milo at 9 months old." She's like, "Well, I couldn't even, you wouldn't stop crying until you'd had 2 cups of Milo in the morning." I'm like, well. But hey, we live and learn. We do the best we can, right? Yeah. So I grew up as a bit of a sugar addict, and had a lot of trouble with my teeth as well. So that's interesting. Yeah. And we did eat mostly good ingredients. Like we had a lot of vegetables in our diet. We used good fats until I was in my late teens. And then for a while there, it was like vegetable oils and margarine were the thing. And then so that sort of changed a bit. And, you know, we get so confused in our society because suddenly we're told science says these things that we've been doing for thousands of years where people thrived on this food. No, they're wrong. You can't eat butter. It's bad for you. Yeah. So I remember when I was 16 hearing all this at school and coming home to mum and saying, Mum, we can't eat butter. Mum, you've got to stop using that lard and, you know, all the saturated fats. You've got to use vegetable oil. And I hassled her until she changed. Poor mum. And, you know, her cholesterol really went up around that time and it got really bad. And she didn't end up sticking to it. She went back to the old fats that she had grown up with and the butter and everything. And interestingly, her cholesterol went back down. Yeah. But that's another story. Yeah. So we really, you know, had our ups and downs with health and learning all this stuff and getting confused by what we were told about the food pyramid and, you know, trying to eat well but getting a bit confused with it all. And I think that's a pretty common story, especially for my generation. I hope the younger generations are going to figure out that, hey, we've got to stick to traditional foods because that's showing us people's health nowadays is really showing us that when we moved away from those traditional foods, that's when our heart disease and obesity and diabetes and autism and all these things just went out of control, and it's still getting worse. So it's really interesting to see the full circle starting to happen and people starting to realize that, hey, for thousands of years, people thrived on these foods. We need to go back to these foods. And I'm hoping that in the work that we do, Fuad and I at Quirky Cooking, that we can really help people to understand why we need to stick to traditional diets and how important it is to eat whole foods and not factory processed foods.
Yeah.
I should mention that as I got older, I started to learn about diet and health and started to change things. But anyway, you go ahead and ask your question and then I'll continue.
How long's Quirky Cooking been going, Jo?
10 years at the end of this year. So woohoo, it's going to be our birthday.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. So in that time, what's been your observation with, you know, the people that tune into the work that you do? Have you seen a big shift in the sort of questions that are being asked?
Yeah.
What are your...
When I first started Quirky Cooking, so like I said, I had a lot of health issues, and then as I got older, I was diagnosed with dairy intolerance, and I started to see that when I pulled back on dairy, gluten, sometimes I'd pull back on grains if I was sick, and sugars, that I would feel better and I would improve. And the same with my kids. And this was like years of trial and error. Probably started working on all this maybe 15 years or more, 20 years ago, and started seeing changes when I was really careful with the way I ate. Whole foods, of course, that was the main focus, but I had still been reacting to foods as well, like dairy. And as I started to figure out recipes that helped me, because I'm just so used to cooking from scratch and making up my own recipes, been doing it since I was a kid. So of course I'd say, well, what can I eat? Or what ingredients can I use to make, you know, my meals and cakes and biscuits and everything? And then I'd play around until I figured something out. And so I started to see health improvements slowly with myself and my kids. And then I started getting people asking about the recipes or the food that I was cooking or whatever, because there's so many people out there with food allergies and intolerances. And I started to share my recipes just by writing them out. And then I thought, you know, it would be so much easier if I just put them on a blog. So that's how Quirky Cooking started.
Yeah. And
at first it was very much focused on how to change the ingredients in your favorite foods to make them dairy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, egg-free, nut-free, whatever you need. So it was focused on food intolerances and allergies. And it just took off. I was doing menu plans each week for people that I would post for free on a site where you could go and download menu plans for different diets. I would do, you know, recipes and put things on Facebook and all of that kind of thing. And it was all just really just something I did out of interest and wanting to help people and wanting to connect with other people. It wasn't a business or anything. And then I started to, as I learnt more, and as we had different health issues come up in our family, it slowly changed from just focusing on tweaking recipes to make them dairy-free, gluten-free, whatever, to healing food. Because I started to realise that food is one of the biggest things to help or harm when you're unwell, especially chronic illness, gut health, that kind of thing. So now the focus is much more on gut health and healing with food, and getting more nutrition into your food, so that you're not just filling up with stuff that's not really doing anything for you.
A big, theme that's coming up as we go through, and I speak to all the different experts in this series, is this massive shift away from what we've all grown up with the food pyramid. And for so many people, it's a leap of faith. It's not always easy to take that leap because we've been so indoctrinated, is the word, with this idea that how would the government come up with a food guideline that was going to make us sick? It can't be the case. But it is what's happened, isn't it?
Definitely. And it's hard because people say, well, it's kind of like we've been working with Hope for Health, which is a group up in far Northern Territory, working with Indigenous health, and we'll be cooking at a retreat up there next year. And one of the things that she said was the Indigenous people in Australia were so healthy up until the 70s. And then they started to bring in the Australian food, the Western food, because they felt like, well, we've been told over and over that the Western, like the white people have everything figured out, and they've got the best technology, and they've got, the government knows best for us. And if this is the food that the white people are eating, then it must be superior food. So they started eating the way we do, and look what's happened to their health. We can see so many cultures throughout the world that as they've changed to the Western diet, within one generation, their health has gone downhill. There's so many studies and everything to show why that's happened. And it's really sad that it's happened. And I think it's time that we started to turn that all around and say, hey, you guys were right after all. We should have been eating like you. And, get back to, putting the fat back in the diet, the good fats, and putting the nutritionally dense foods back in, and getting rid of the rubbish and junk that's made in a factory. And it's interesting to see how quickly health can change when you do change back to a whole food diet. It's amazing.
There's two levels in that, isn't there? Because there is the people that get great results, and then there's people that need to take it to the next level, which is
which we had to do.
Yeah. So can you, maybe if we have a look at that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So like I said, my health was slowly but steadily improving with gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free type eating. I wasn't perfect with it. I'd go a bit of a roller coaster. I'd get a bit slack sometimes when I was out. It was a bit 80-20, and then we got to the stage where my first cookbook came out, and around that time Isaac got quite anxious while I was working on the book and afterwards. And then probably a few months after the book came out, he suddenly crashed really badly with his anxiety. Like, it became these gigantic phobias. He just couldn't do anything. He was pretty much incapacitated. He would just cry and scream all the time. It was like he could see things we couldn't. He said when he had lucid moments, he would tell us he felt like he was living in another world, and he knew it wasn't rational, but he had to do everything like his mind told him to do to be safe. So he had to, repeat actions. He had to walk a certain way around the kitchen and a certain amount of times. He had to turn lights off and on a certain amount of times. He had to think the right thought while doing a certain action. And if he couldn't get it right and the timing all right and the thoughts all right, he had to do it again and again and again until he got it figured out. And so, of course, he just couldn't do school. He couldn't get changed. He couldn't have a shower. He couldn't do anything. I was spoon feeding him at 13 years old. And it turned out to be severe OCD, which I didn't realize at first is much more than just being scared of germs. It was, all the obsessive compulsive behavior and just a lot of really crazy stuff that I had no idea people suffered from. A lot of research, a lot of talking to experts, and we began the GAPS diet, which stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome, to heal the gut, because once you heal the gut, that really helps with the brain function. And his gut had become so damaged over the years that he just wasn't coping with everyday life. He was very small, so he was like undernourished. He could eat and eat and eat, and I was cooking what I felt was really good food, but he couldn't assimilate the nourishment from that food. And I was similar, not as bad as him, but I was very thin. I'd suffered from anxiety a lot throughout my life, especially my adult life. Had the dark circles under my eyes, had the food intolerances, still had the colds and hay fever a bit, not as bad as when I was younger, but I still had it. Very exhausted, had to have a sleep every afternoon. My eldest daughter had candida, mood swings, very underweight, skin issues, hormone stuff. I had all the hormone stuff as well, which ended up in fibroids, which ended up in emergency hysterectomy. There was just so much in the family, and it's actually really interesting. Now and then a photo will pop up on Facebook memories, and I'll just go, I'm gobsmacked at how terrible we looked back then, and I did not even realize. I saw a photo of my daughter 8 years ago, and the poor little thing was this really narrow face and like bruises under her eyes. And I don't know why I never realized that was not normal, but I didn't. And, Isaac was so tiny for his age, and he'd get constipated and all of that kind of thing. So we started working on gut health and basically took our food back from, a whole food diet with mostly gluten-free, but a lot of starchy food and still probably way too much sugars, even though they were natural sugars. We took it right back to meat stocks, soft-cooked meat and veggies, and good fats. And we slowly, as we healed, we added in egg yolks, and then avocado, and then egg whites, and then some homemade nut butter, and then some homemade baking with nuts and seeds, but no grains, no starchy foods, nothing that was raw or hard to digest for a fair while. So the amino acids and the collagen and the glutamine and all of those things, those great things in the meat stocks really help to heal the gut lining. They rebuild the cells, the good fats. Your cell membranes are made up of fat. So whatever fats you're eating will build your cells. So we wanted the good fats that, are what our body needs. So we worked on that. We worked on the fermented foods.
How long was that sort of time frame, Jo, that you were...
2 years strictly of bringing foods back in. And then the third year was slowly adding in a bit of sweet potato and legumes and quinoa and buckwheat and things like that, just bringing those in slowly, so the more starchy foods. And then now we're back to whole foods. Took me a year of working on gut health to be able to have dairy again, and so now I'm good with dairy. I don't go crazy with it. I mostly have fermented dairy plus cream, butter and ghee. But before I couldn't even have ghee. That I'd react to that, which is pretty uncommon. So it's just amazing to see the difference in all of us. I mean, when I was 35, I got down to 42 kilos and I was super, super anxious. Like, as in, I'd wake up in the morning and I couldn't get out of bed for an hour because I felt like my body was paralyzed with anxiety. And if anyone's been through anxiety, you know what I mean. You just cannot move. And I'd lay there and I'd just like pray and cry and just try and get myself out of bed. And I'd finally psych myself up enough, feel okay to get out of bed. And then I'd sort of get my husband off to work, get the kids organized for breakfast, and then I'd go back to my bed. And then I'd get up again and I'd make them lunch or whatever. And then I'd go and have a sleep after lunch. And then I'd go to bed at 7:30. I was just so anxious, and that was my escape to sleep. And really thin, really unwell. And to see the difference now, I'm about 12 kilos. Oh, no, sorry, I'm more than that now. But, from the time I started to get better and then we started GAPS, I gained another 10 to 12 kilos then, which I really needed to gain. So don't freak out though if you're doing GAPS or gut healing. Doesn't mean you're going to gain weight. It's just that my body balanced out to where it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So like Fuad's story, he talked about losing the weight. We ate the same foods.
Yeah.
He lost weight, I gained weight. So it's really interesting, when you give your body the foods it needs to heal and the foods it needs to build the cells and to cleanse out toxins, it really just settles down and balances out to where it's meant to be. Yeah. And we found that the kids, Isaac started growing. We've really seen a difference in all of the kids. Just the difference actually even in face shape, like mine was really narrow and my daughter, and looking at the difference with photos side by side, our faces widened. So many differences. The energy levels are amazing. I'm so happy. I've had times, like I said, I had to have that surgery because of hormone issues building up over the years and thyroids and all that kind of thing. So at the start of the year I had surgery, and that took me down again a little, and I went into a bit of adrenal fatigue, and I've worked through that and come out the other side of that now, so I'm feeling heaps better. I do have to be careful with my energy, not to overload myself, but keeping on top of the food and the rest and keeping stress down is just like, it's been amazing. It's helped me so much, and all of us. So yeah, Isaac was off all medication within a year with that diet, and hasn't looked back. So yay.
I know there's going to be a lot of mums going, how on earth do you get your kids to live on such a restricted diet?
Yeah. No, I would love to talk about that. And also one of the questions that I get a lot is, I need to change my diet, even if it's not as strict as GAPS. Maybe you just want to change to eating healthier.
Yeah.
But people just feel like their family and their social group give them a hard time, and it makes it very difficult when you go out, and they feel like it's too overwhelming, it's too hard. I can't stand all the pressure, I give in. So, do you want me to maybe talk about that a little?
I think that's a huge part of the picture.
Yeah, because it was hard. When I first started, I remember feeling really alone.
Yeah.
And at the time, like I said, I was very anxious when all around this time. I was very anxious and very, I guess, very stressy, and I didn't feel like I fit in. You get that times in life where you've sort of, with friends, you'll have seasons where you're really close to someone and then something happens and that, that friendship peters out.
Yeah.
And you feel like I have no friends in the world, which of course isn't true, but you feel like that. Well, I went through a stage like that, and it was right when I was changing my diet, and it felt like everybody I met thought I was absolutely wacky because of what I was doing, including family.
Yeah.
And I did get a lot of flack from people I knew saying, you're making your kids weird by eating that way. It's too strict. It's too harsh. Everything in moderation, 80-20, blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. Like, I am totally a big believer in finding balance and not being, what's the word, harsh on yourself or on others with diet. And I never have nagged at people about how they eat. I don't do that.
Yeah.
but because of how sick Isaac was, we had to pull it right back. And it was something that it was out of desperation. So there was no choice. So we had to go through a stage where we pulled back a little bit from social outings just for a little while, maybe a month.
Yeah.
And I said to the kids, you're not doing sleepovers. You're not, we'll go places, but we'll take food with us.
Yeah.
And we're just going to stick to this food. And at first, when I first told them what we were going to do, Isaac was fine because he understood. He researched stuff with me and he was totally on board. He was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's try it. The other kids were a bit upset. They were like, no bread for 2 years. And so they freaked out a little.
They're older, aren't they?
They were older.
Yeah.
And my husband wasn't really keen. He thought it was too harsh, how can food make that much of a difference? He was not keen on eating soup a lot because he doesn't like soup. So luckily he went away for 3 weeks to visit family and we started then. Yeah. But I just said to my kids, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to eat. I cleaned out all of my pantry, my freezer, my fridge. I just cleaned out all the ingredients that I wasn't going to be using for the next couple of years. I just got rid of them, threw them away, or gave them away if they were good ingredients. Yeah. I said to the kids, I'm not going to buy any of these foods or ingredients. This is how I'm going to be cooking. If you want anything else, you'll have to go and earn the money and go to the shops, buy it and cook your own. And I said the same thing to my husband nicely. And so the kids didn't really have a choice because back then they didn't have jobs or cars, so it was great. And so they just ate what they were given. And I was really careful when they went out to someone's house to send food with them that was similar to what the family were having. So, for instance, if they were going to someone's place and the kids were all going to be eating pizza, I would make our own version of pizza where the base is a really thin layer of mince and the toppings are heaps of veggies. And before we could have the cheese, we had like a whisked egg and there was all sorts of variations, my Quirky style. And they became really used to taking a thermos of food with them wherever they went, of taking homemade snacks. And really quickly it became the norm to them and they started to feel better. And so that helped to reinforce it. Yeah. And then people started to see the change and actually their friends would come over and they'd be like, oh, actually this food's really delicious. I wish we ate like this at home because it is delicious food. Yeah. And so the kids would, be sharing food with them, which was really funny. You still get the comments from people at first on how harsh the diet is. And even I went to a naturopath that I'd known for years and she even said, oh no, it's too harsh. No one can stick to that. And I was thinking, do you actually know what the food is? Because it's really delicious food. Like you start off with a narrow amount of ingredients you can have, but very soon you're adding things in like an elimination diet. And it's all very yummy. It's just, at first it's hard. Anyway, so we saw, I think seeing the difference in our health helped my parents, for instance, and my husband to be on board, which they weren't really at first. With the friends and, people that were acquaintances and stuff, I got quite thick-skinned. I just didn't worry anymore what they thought. When I was younger, I found it really hard to be different, but by this time I knew that I had to do the best thing for my family, no matter what anyone thought, and it wasn't really their business. And so I just did it and didn't argue with anyone. If they made fun, I just went, whatever, walked away, And then now it's really interesting. Even just recently, I had a phone call from a guy that we've known for years, and he'd moved away to another town and he started a family and he's got 3 little ones. And he rang me and said, hey, this is really awkward and I know this is weird, but I need to talk to you about something. And I'm thinking, what? You get these phone calls, you're like, I need to talk to you about something. It's like, oh no, what have I done? He goes, no, it's just that for years I hassled you about how you ate. And he said I would talk behind your back with friends of our mutual friends about how weird you were and really bag you out and make fun of you for the way you ate. And I was thinking, yes, it was a really hard time when all my friends seemed to do that. And he said, I just want to apologize because I realize now you were right. It made me cry. And he said, I've gained a lot of weight and we've been unwell. And my wife started looking into healthy eating, and like she was pretty much living on coke, and her teeth had been damaged from it. And he said, we started looking into healthy eating. We started changing our diet. We basically went on to like a keto diet. And he said, it keeps bothering me that I was so mean to you when I can see now why you did what you did. So he rang to apologize. And that meant so much to me because, it's not often that someone does apologize. Yeah. But also just seeing how much they've changed and how much healthier they are now. It's just so beautiful. And my encouragement to those of you who have had to change your diet and are really finding it difficult with family and friends, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't nag at them. Don't preach at them. Don't hassle them. The catchphrase in my mind is quiet persistence. Just keep doing it. Yeah. Block out the noise. Figure out what's the best for your family and stick to it. Yeah. And they will see the results down the road, and you'll start seeing your friends changing their diet, friends asking for recipes, friends recommending you to other friends. In the last week, I've had 5 families, friends that have been around for years, come to me and ask for help with diet. In the last week, there's been 5. Yeah. And I just think, it's finally hitting home to a lot of my friends that what we did really helped our family and that it can help them too. So that's just a bit of encouragement for those of you just beginning.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I think that these conversations are just going to come up more and more and more because the escalation in ill health is just, it's tripling by the minute. It feels like the rate that people's health is falling down.
Yeah. Everyone around seems to have some kind of chronic illness in their family.
Yeah.
Sad.
So how do we get past, we there's so much conversation around the confusion around food. We get bombarded with the excellence of paleo versus the excellence of vegan, but and the science that is coming through in the news and the media and mainstream, there's just so many things that are flip-flopping all over the place.
Overwhelming.
How do you wade through that and just get a bit of clarity around what makes sense?
Okay, I think the first thing to look at is what foods have traditional cultures been thriving on for thousands of years. So that's a really important thing. Like, I know people go, but that's not a scientific study. Well, it is kind of, because there's results.
Yeah.
You can look at the science as well, but make sure you're getting current research and it's properly done. There's actually a really great, there is some great studies being done. Like, one of them recently was about the fats and oils debate. So olive oil, people say, don't cook with olive oil. It's, it goes bad. Well, this proved the opposite, that olive oil is one of the best oils to cook with, and that, and it talks about the traditional oils, but that the modern oils like grapeseed oil, rice bran oil, canola oil, the vegetable oils and seed oils, very dangerous to cook with. And it showed the over a certain amount of hours what happened to the oils and how the trans fats shot up, with these vegetable oils and seed oils. And so there is a lot of great studies out there, and they always prove that traditional foods and the way that we've been using these oils and fats and traditional foods for thousands of years are actually the way we should continue using them. So I always think to myself, okay, so when I'm looking at an oil or a fat, for instance, can it be made traditionally? Can I just go and get some rice bran and squeeze it through a press and get an oil? No. That needs super high heats. It needs chemicals to extract it. And there's so many, like grape seeds, for instance, as well. That's not a traditional fat. Whereas if you make coconut oil, that's a traditional fat. The people in the islands that have always used it don't have any, like, anywhere near the problems with heart disease and obesity and things that we have in our culture.
Yeah.
So looking at what people have used traditionally and how they've been made and keeping them as close to whole foods as possible, the way nature intended it, the way our bodies are designed to eat it, keep food as close as possible to nature. And then obviously we want to have mostly vegetables and some fruits for that should be the bottom of the pyramid, the veggie.
Yep. We
need that for fiber. We need that for cleaning out our bodies. It detoxes us to eat vegetables and fruits. But then we also, my belief is that we need, an understanding is that we also need the amino acids and the good fats because they build the cells. Mm-hmm. So you've got the foods that cleanse, the vegetables and fruits, and then you've got the ones that build the cells. So the amino acids and the fats really help with that. And meats and fats and animal products have always traditionally been in traditional diets in different levels. In some countries, in some cultures it's mostly fat, in some cultures it's mostly fish, in some cultures it's mostly dairy or eggs, like for instance in India with the vegetarian diets, it's the good fats like ghee, it's the eggs and dairy as well as the vegetables, and the pulses. Preparing your legumes and pulses properly so that they're not, and any grains that you use, preparing them properly so they're well soaked and easy to digest. Yeah. I think that's really important. And I do think it's different for everyone. It can be partly your genetic makeup as to where you're from. So if you're European, you may not cope well with coconut oil because it's never been in your family. If you're from, the islands, you may not cope well with olive oil. It's different. And that's something that you have to work out. That's one thing I really loved about GAPS, actually, because you pulled right back to very basic foods and then slowly added foods in. Each time you added a food in, you would wait for 3 days to see what the reactions were, and you really became aware of what suited your body, and you could really listen. Yeah. And I think that's something that we've lost in our modern culture when we're just eating factory processed foods and, we're not really eating whole foods as much as we should be. We lose the ability to listen to the instincts of our body, and when our body craves a whole food, there's a reason for that. It may need the magnesium in it. It may need the iron in it. It may need whatever. So listening to those good cravings, not the chips and chocolate cravings, and sort of really keeping an eye on how your body responds to certain foods. I think that's really important. Yeah. So I wouldn't push a certain diet and say everybody has to do GAPS, or everybody should be paleo and eat no grains, or everybody should avoid legumes, or everybody should have vegetarian. I would never say, there's a blanket approach. Yeah. I think whole food is the main thing, and then work it out from there. And honestly, at different seasons of life, it also changes. Yeah. And different seasons of the year, it can change. So you can really crave salads and fruits and veggies in the summer, and then in the winter you want the warming casseroles and soups and stews, and that's normal. Yeah. So, there's a lot of variables to that whole discussion. I hope that helped.
When we were talking, a question came up. It's something that I haven't actually thought about. Mm-hmm. In traditional diets, are there any vegan traditional diets?
No, there's not. Never has been.
No, yeah, I didn't think there was. I'm just thinking that I know the Papua New Guineans live on like lots of tubers and...
Yeah, but they have birds, fish, animals, mammals, chickens, pigs.
It's a really hot topic, and I even, as I sit here, I feel reluctant to bring it up because I've shared just, sort of food for thought articles, not... Yeah. The attack is
no, and I would never attack anyone for their diet choice. And I understand, especially with vegans, is generally the concern about the ethical, raising food ethically. And I'm completely on board with that. I don't believe that we should be eating factory raised pigs and cattle and all of that stuff. It's no good for our health, and it's cruel to them. So finding suppliers in your area that raise animals ethically is so important.
Yeah.
But yeah, there hasn't ever been a culture that is vegan.
Yeah.
They call it the modern rich people's diet because you have to be able to afford to eat that way. If you're in a traditional culture, you'll eat whatever you can find that's local, wild, whole foods. And, you know, that's generally including fish and birds and whatever farmed animals they may have, and bugs and worms and all sorts of things. Yeah. So, yeah, that's something to think about for sure.
The vegetarian diet. I mean, I was vegetarian for 20 years.
Wow.
Naturopathic training and all that background. And I just failed to thrive. I just got sicker and sicker. And
I wouldn't be able to do it. I need my protein, my immune.
I had a couple of things. One is Cindy kind of slowly got in my ear, and I ended up doing 4 phase, and you can't do 4 phase vegetarian. Yeah. And then I married a South African. So it was a no-brainer. I started eating meat again. But the ethical aspect is hugely important to me.
Yeah.
There's no way that I will order a chicken something when I'm out because I don't know where that chicken's come from. The idea of
admirable
cage-raised chickens and so on just horrifies me. So it is. It's a tricky subject. It's a tricky subject.
And we all just have to do the best we can with the knowledge we have.
Yeah.
And but don't be afraid to look into things and change your diet if it's not working. Yeah. Don't get so, you know, people can get so focused on a certain diet that they almost feel religious about it. And I don't think that that's a smart thing to do. I think you should always have an open mind to, you know, the research and to looking into traditional diets and really, like, honestly look into it because it's your health and your children's health. Can't be dogmatic about something without being sure that it's good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, part of the reason that I've put this series together is, despite my background with food and all the education and research that I've done, the information at the moment, I think very excitingly, is really starting to become a bit more consolidated. We know so much more about our precious gut and the absolute role that it plays in our mental health, not just our physical health. And
such a role.
I mean, we've got, you know, I've got the gorgeous Professor Noakes, Tim Noakes is a part of this series.
Awesome.
And, you know, just pulling this knowledge now together and looking at the importance of all the things that we've grown up being scared of, you know, fat and, you know, that there's so many things that we were worried about that are actually going to just help us so much more. And they make our diets so much yummier, Jo.
Yeah. I remember back when I was saying, when I was really anxious and really thin and really unwell, I didn't eat bacon for years, so that made me anxious and sad. No, not really. It was like too much fat. I cut all the fat off chicken and steak, and like I'd simmer things in stock instead of using any fat for cooking. I was really careful not to have the fat. And I had all the hormone issues and the skin issues and all of those things. And when, you know, part of my healing was bringing good fats back in, and it's just made such a big difference. Also, I was always hungry every 2 hours because I lived on carbs. And my blood sugar was just like this all the time. And now I'll go for hours and go, oh, haven't had lunch yet, I'll get to that soon, because I just last so much longer on a higher fat diet. And that's another thing that's very individual. Like, I've got a son who doesn't cope well with a lot of fat, and so he'll just naturally push aside fat a bit more. He does have like heaps more fat than I ever used to in his diet, just like it's all in the food, but he doesn't want as much as I do. Like, I'll add butter to my vegetables and everything, whereas he won't. So it's interesting. It is different for everyone. But yeah, it's something that is definitely not to be completely avoided.
And that protein is a big part of that satiety as well. And I know I went from at least 5 meals a day to now I eat twice a day, and without
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a bit of broth in between if I get hungry, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you have a gift for our audience. Would you take a minute to tell us about that?
Sure. So is Fuad's talk before mine or after?
I haven't scheduled it, but Fuad is on this end. We'll work that out.
Okay, so we're offering the same gift. So if you go onto our program page, which is gaps.quirkycooking.com.au, that's for our online gut health program.
Yeah.
There's a free download on the homepage that anyone can get, and it goes through 20 points of things to work on for your health, for your gut health. 10 of them are lifestyle changes and 10 of them are food changes. So we're pretty passionate about helping people to make small changes that are doable and not just go, here, do gaps, everyone should do it. But we just think that there's so many things that people can start putting into their diet and their lifestyle that will start to heal and reduce stress and help with so many things. So that's a free download that you can look, and there's a lot of links in there to podcasts and articles and stuff that will be helpful.
Yeah.
And then the program itself is worth $200, and we have a discount code for that. And let me just see if I can find what it is. Sorry, I forgot to do that.
Joe, don't worry, because I'll just give a link for it, and then people just have to tap a button.
Oh, good. Okay, so if you go down below, maybe use the link.
Easy, yeah, it'll be below this.
Yes, so we've got a discount for, I think it's 25% off, and you guys can go in there. And we're actually in the process of updating the program. So it's great for people with autoimmune issues. It's great for healing the gut. It's great for sort of learning to put more whole food meals and snacks into your family's meals. So even if you don't completely want to follow gaps, that's fine. You'll still find 6 ebooks of recipes in there with meal plans, and you can swap and change things around and just figure out the kinds of meals your family would love. It's got cooking videos. It's got downloadable sheets to help you figure out where you're at with your gut health and to help you with detoxing your home and all sorts of stuff. So we wanted to give you a discount on that.
That's perfect. Yay. Thank you so much. I'm going to mention before we wind this up, I've got quite a lot of recipe books in my cupboard, but Jo, Quirky Cooking and Life-Changing Food, they are my favourite. I don't mind sharing that.
Thank you.
I have the most used recipe books in my cupboard. And, my kids just, I've got Hermione particularly, who's 15 now. She's my chef, and she...
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Jo. As always, it was fantastic.
You're so welcome. I hope I didn't babble on too much.
No, not enough, more likely. All right, Jo, we'll have to wind it up. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.